The entire courtroom burst into laughter when the police officer mocked the judge. But 10 minutes later, nobody was laughing anymore, because the same officer who thought he controlled the room was about to watch his entire career collapse. In front of dozens of witnesses, 3 cameras, and a judge who had spent 30 years watching men like him make the same fatal mistake. What happened that day inside the courtroom didn't just ruin one officer's reputation. It exposed a secret that the entire department had been hiding for years, and the moment it came out, there was no stopping what followed. If you enjoy intense courtroom stories where arrogance meets justice, make sure you're subscribed to Beyond the Gavel, because the case you're about to hear proves one simple truth. Sometimes the most dangerous mistake a person can make is underestimating the person sitting behind the bench. It was a cold Tuesday morning when courtroom 6A slowly filled with people. Lawyers shuffled papers. Journalists adjusted their cameras. And 2 uniformed officers escorted a young man into the defendant's chair. His name was Marcus Reed, 19 years old. First offense: charged with resisting arrest and assaulting a police officer. The arresting officer sat confidently at the witness table. Officer Daniel Mercer, 5 years on the force, decorated, aggressive, and widely known in the department. As someone who didn't like being questioned, Mercer leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, looking completely relaxed. To him, this was routine. Another suspect, another quick testimony, another case closed before lunch. Across the room, Marcus Reed sat stiffly beside his public defender, his hands shaking slightly. He had never been inside a courtroom before, and everything about the place felt overwhelming. The tall ceilings, the wooden benches, the quiet tension hanging in the air. But none of that bothered Officer Mercer. It testified dozens of times before, and in his mind, today would be no different. The courtroom door opened. Everyone stood. Judge Elijah Carter entered the room. He was a tall man in his early 60s, with calm eyes and a composed expression that rarely changed. His reputation inside the legal community was simple, fair, patient, but absolutely impossible to intimidate. For 30 years, Judge Carter had watched hundreds of officers testify in his courtroom. Some honest, some not. He had learned to tell the difference quickly. "Be seated," he said calmly. The room settled. Prosecutor stood and began outlining the case. According to Officer Mercer's report, Marcus Reed had violently resisted arrest during a traffic stop the previous week. Mercer claimed the young man punched him during the struggle. The charge was simple: assault on an officer. If convicted, Marcus Reed could face up to 5 years in prison. When the prosecutor finished, Judge Carter nodded. "Call your first witness, Officer Daniel Mercer," the prosecutor said. Mercer stood up confidently and walked to the witness stand. He raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth, then sat down with the relaxed posture of someone who believed the outcome was already decided. The questioning began smoothly. "Officer Mercer, can you describe what happened on the evening of March 12th? Mercer leaned into the microphone. "Routine traffic stop," he said casually. "The suspect became aggressive when I asked him to exit the vehicle." He glanced briefly toward. Marcus read, "I attempted to restrain him, but he struck me in the chest and resisted arrest." The prosecutor nodded. "And that's when you used force to subdue him?" "Correct." Judge Carter listened quietly, occasionally writing notes on a legal pad. After a few minutes, the prosecutor finished.
"Your witness."
Marcus Reed's public defender stood. Her name was Angela Ruiz, and unlike Mercer, she looked completely focused. "Officer Mercer," she began calmly, "you stated that my client struck you first. Is that correct?" "Yes, and there were no witnesses. Just my partner," Mercer replied, "who wrote the same report you did." "That's correct." Angela Ruiz walked slowly across the courtroom. "Officer Mercer, were your body cameras active during the stop?" Mercer shrugged. "They malfunctioned." There was a faint murmur in the courtroom. Judge Carter looked up from his notes. "Both cameras malfunctioned." Mercer nodded without hesitation. "Yes, Your Honor." Angela Ruiz tilted her head slightly. "It's unfortunate," she said. Mercer smirked. "Technology isn't perfect." Judge Carter continued writing, but his expression didn't change. Angela Ruiz continued. "Officer Mercer, how long have you been on the force?" 5 years. And during those 5 years, how many excessive force complaints have been filed against you? Mercer's smile faded slightly.
Perhaps.
None that were sustained. Angela nodded slowly. So there were complaints. Objection, the prosecutor said quickly. Relevance. Judge Carter looked up. Ruled. Angela Ruiz continued. Officer Mercer, please answer the question. Mercer shifted slightly in his seat. There had been a few complaints. And were any of those incidents recorded? No, another malfunction, Angela asked. A few quiet chuckles came from the gallery. Mercer rolled his eyes. Things break. Judge Carter looked up again. His pen stopped moving. Angela Ruiz stepped closer. Officer Mercer, are you aware that a security camera from a nearby building recorded part of the arrest? Mercer frowned slightly. I'm not aware of that. Angela reached into her folder. What? We obtained the footage yesterday. The courtroom grew quieter. Mercer leaned back in his chair. I'd like to see that. Angela Ruiz smiled slightly. You will. But before she could continue, Mercer suddenly laughed, not a small chuckle, a loud dismissive laugh that echoed through the courtroom. Judge Carter slowly looked up. Mercer shook his head, still smiling. Your Honor, he said, barely containing his amusement. This is ridiculous. The room went silent. Angela Ruiz stopped mid-step. Judge Carter folded his hands on the bench. Officer Mercer, he said calmly, what exactly do you find amusing? Mercer leaned back comfortably. This whole thing, he said. This kid tries to swing at me. Now suddenly there's some mystery video that's supposed to prove I did something wrong. He chuckled again. Next thing you know, we'll be putting criminals on the bench and cops in handcuffs. A few people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. Judge Carter watched him quietly. Mercer wasn't finished. He gestured casually toward Marcus Reed. Look at him, Mercer said with a laugh. He's lucky he's even sitting in a courtroom instead of a jail cell. Angela Ruiz's jaw tightened, but Judge Carter still hadn't spoken. Mercer leaned forward slightly. You know what the problem is, Your Honor? He said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. People in this courtroom think they understand what happens on the streets. He looked directly at the judge. But you don't. A shocked murmur spread through the room. Angela Ruiz whispered under her breath. Big mistake. Mercer didn't notice. He was too busy smiling. Maybe if judges spent less time protecting criminals and more time supporting the police. He shrugged. Things would actually get done. The courtroom went completely silent. Judge Carter slowly removed his glasses, and for the first time since the hearing began, he leaned forward. The calm expression on his face hadn't changed, but something in the room had, because what Officer Mercer didn't know, what nobody in that courtroom knew yet, was that 10 minutes earlier, Judge Carter had already seen the video. Judge Carter set his glasses down slowly. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the faint hum of the ceiling lights. Officer Daniel Mercer still had that same smirk on his face, leaning comfortably in the witness chair like a man who believed he had already won. But the judge's eyes had changed. They were no longer calm. They were focused. Officer Mercer, Judge Carter said quietly, you seem very confident about the events of that evening. Mercer shrugged. I'm just telling the truth, Your Honor. Angela Ruiz glanced toward the bench. She had practiced law long enough to recognize when something important was about to happen. Judge Carter reached for a small folder sitting beside his legal pad. What you may not know, the judge continued calmly, is that the court received a piece of evidence this morning. Mercer's smirk faded slightly. A piece of evidence? The prosecutor asked quickly. Judge Carter nodded. Yes, he opened the folder. Security recordings submitted by the owner of a grocery store located approximately 30 feet from the traffic stop. The room immediately filled with murmurs. Mercer sat up straighter. Angela Ruiz's eyes widened. The prosecutor quickly stood. Your Honor, the prosecution has not reviewed any such evidence. You will, Judge Carter replied calmly. He looked toward the bailiff. Please bring the monitor forward. Within seconds, a small video monitor was placed in front of the witness stand and another facing the judge. Mercer watched the screen carefully. His confidence was still there, but it was beginning to crack. Judge Carter looked at him. Officer Mercer, before we proceed, I will give you one opportunity to clarify your testimony. Mercer blinked. Clarify. Yes, the judge folded his hands. You testified under oath that Mr. Reed struck you first. That's correct, Mercer said firmly. And you also testified that both body cameras malfunctioned. Yes. Judge Carter nodded once. Very well. He pressed a button. The video began playing. At first, it was silent black and white footage from the corner of the grocery store. A patrol car. Marcus Reed's vehicle. 2 officers standing near the driver's door. Mercer leaned back again. This proves nothing, he said quietly. But then the video continued. The footage clearly showed Marcus Reed stepping out of his car with his hands raised. Angela Ruiz leaned forward slowly. The courtroom was completely silent. On the screen, Mercer walked toward Marcus. Without warning, he shoved him hard against the car. Marcus staggered but didn't fight back. The video showed him raising both hands again. The time stamp on the corner of the screen confirmed everything. Marcus wasn't attacking, he was complying. Angela Ruiz slowly looked toward the jury box. Prosecutor shifted uncomfortably, but the footage wasn't finished. Mercer's voice could now be faintly heard through the store's outdoor microphone. Stop moving. Marcus's voice responded nervously. I'm not moving. Then suddenly Mercer struck him. A hard blow directly into Marcus's ribs. Gasps erupted across the courtroom. On the video, Marcus doubled over in pain. Then Mercer shoved him to the ground. Judge Carter paused the video. The silence in the room felt suffocating. He looked directly at the officer. Officer Mercer, the judge said calmly, would you like to reconsider your testimony? Mercer's face had gone pale. That video doesn't show the whole situation. Angela Ruiz crossed her arms. Shows enough. Mercer swallowed hard. He was resisting. Judge Carter pressed play again. The next 30 seconds destroyed the last piece of Mercer's story. Marcus lay face down on the pavement with his hands behind his head. Mercer stood over him. Then he looked directly at his partner and laughed. Even through the grainy microphone, the words were clear. This kid thought he could talk back to me. A wave of whispers spread through the courtroom. Judge Carter stopped the video again. Then he looked directly at Mercer. You laughed, the judge said quietly. Mercer didn't respond. You laughed, the judge repeated, while a compliant citizen was lying on the ground. Mercer looked down at the desk. Angela Ruiz spoke calmly. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Carter nodded slowly. Then he leaned forward. Officer Mercer, he said, his voice steady but firm. This court takes false testimony very seriously. Mercer tried to speak, but the judge raised a hand. You mocked this courtroom. You mocked this bench. And more importantly, you lied under oath. The room was completely still. Judge Carter looked toward the bailiff. Remove Officer Mercer from the stand. Mercer's head snapped up. Your Honor, but the judge wasn't finished. I am referring this matter immediately to Internal Affairs and the District Attorney for investigation of perjury and misconduct. Mercer's face went completely white. Judge Carter's voice cut through the room one final time. Officer Daniel Mercer, you are relieved of duty effective immediately pending investigation. The words hit the courtroom like thunder. Mercer stood frozen. The same officer who had laughed just minutes earlier now looked like a man watching his entire future disappear. Angela Ruiz slowly sat down beside Marcus Reed. Marcus stared at the screen in disbelief. The prosecutor quietly gathered her papers. But the judge wasn't done yet. He turned toward Marcus. Mr. Reed, he said calmly. Yes, sir. Marcus's shoulders dropped, as if a massive weight had just been lifted. Tears filled his eyes. The judge nodded once. You're free to go. The courtroom erupted into murmurs as Mercer was escorted toward the exit. And for the first time since the hearing began, no one was laughing. 6 months later, the outcome became national news. Officer Daniel Mercer was officially terminated from the police department. The district attorney filed charges for perjury, falsifying reports, and unlawful use of force. The investigation uncovered something even worse. 3 previous complaints against Mercer had been quietly buried by supervisors. Once the footage became public, those cases were reopened. Marcus Reed filed a civil lawsuit against the department. The city settled the case for $2.8 million. But the biggest change happened inside the department itself. The police chief announced mandatory camera audits and independent reviews for all excessive force complaints. One moment in a courtroom had exposed a system that had been protecting the wrong people for years. And it all started with a laugh. Marcus Reed eventually returned to college and finished his degree. Angela Ruiz continued defending cases just like his. And Judge Elijah Carter kept doing exactly what he had always done. Watching, listening, waiting for the truth to reveal itself. Because sometimes arrogance walks into a courtroom believing it's untouchable. But justice has a way of waiting patiently. And when the truth finally appears, careers end. If this story kept you watching until the end, tell me something in the comments. Do you think Officer Mercer should have gone to prison? Or was losing his badge enough? Share this video with someone who believes the truth always comes out in the end. And if you want more intense courtroom stories like this, make sure you subscribe to Beyond the Gavel so you never miss the next case where arrogance meets justice.